For your entire life, a definitive boundary has been drawn in your mind. On one side, the name Lucifer represents the ultimate enemy of God, the fallen, the very embodiment of cosmic darkness and evil. On the other side, the name Jesus stands as the light, the Savior, the supreme example of divine good. Two names, two diametrically opposed forces. But a profound discomfort arises when you realize that human history is often written by the victors, and semantic definitions can be altered to serve powerful institutions. What if those two seemingly opposite names actually point toward the exact same esoteric symbol, and the evidence has been sitting buried in plain sight, preserved in sacred texts for nearly 2 millennia? This knowledge is not a theory. It is not a conspiracy. It is a matter of translation, linguistic history, and the systematic suppression of a theological framework that once offered an entirely different version of reality. To understand this, we must look at the people who were hunted, whose writings were burned, and whose legacy was erased from common knowledge because they held a key that the established order feared. These individuals are known today as the Gnostics. The Gnostics were not a monolithic cult operating on the lunatic fringe. In the first few centuries following the life of Jesus, Gnostic communities thrived across Rome, Egypt, and Syria. They were intellectually rigorous, deeply spiritual individuals who offered a version of Christianity radically different from what became the official doctrine of the Roman Empire. Their central tenet was simple yet explosive. Liberation is not achieved through blind faith, adherence to external rules, or subjugation to an institution. It is achieved through gnosis, a Greek term signifying direct, experiential, internal knowledge of the divine truth. For a centralized power structure like the developing Roman Church, which was in the process of standardizing belief under Emperor Constantine, the concept of gnosis was an existential threat. If divine knowledge could be found within oneself, the middleman was obsolete. Institutions, tithes, bishops, and empires were no longer necessary. This is precisely why Rome declared Gnostic thought a heresy. The empire did not merely disagree, it initiated a systematic purge. Gnostic texts were destroyed, their teachers were silenced, and the symbol at the very heart of their profound secret, the bringer of light, was deliberately inverted and turned into the most feared entity on the planet. Why would a system claiming to hold the exclusive truth need to burn the people and destroy the ancient writings that offered a different perspective? Perhaps because they did not have the truth, only the power to enforce a beneficial narrative. Let us examine the very word that triggers this fear: Lucifer. Most people have never actually investigated its origin, relying entirely on centuries of inherited doctrine. The name Lucifer appears exactly one time in the entire Bible. It is found in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, which reads, quote, "How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning," unquote. From this single line, theological architects constructed an entire mythology of a cosmic war, fallen angels, horns, fire, and the adversary of God. However, a serious issue arises in the language. The Bible was not written in English. It was not even written in Latin. Isaiah was written in Hebrew, and in the original Hebrew text of Isaiah 14, the word Lucifer does not exist. The word sitting in the original scripture is Hallel. Hallel is a poetic, descriptive title derived from the Hebrew verb implying to shine, to radiate brilliant light, or to gleam. It was a term used to describe something luminous and visually dominant. The reason the word Lucifer is in your English Bible is because of a single individual named Jerome. In the 4th century, Jerome was tasked by the Church with creating a definitive Latin translation of the Scriptures, a text that would become known as the Vulgate and would serve as the official Bible of Catholicism for over 1,000 years. When Jerome encountered the Hebrew word Hallel, which meant shining one, he made a direct linguistic choice. He translated it into the standard Latin word that carried the same literal meaning. That Latin word was Lucifer. In Latin, the components are clear. Lux or lucis means light. Fere means to bring or to carry. Lucifer, in its original dictionary definition, means the light bearer, or the bringer of light. It was not a title for the devil. It was not a name for evil. It was a description of luminosity. Jerome, working under the direct theological authority of an empire that had already begun deciding which doctrines were acceptable, translated a description of brightness into a proper name that would later be weaponized to generate fear and unquestioning obedience. Now, consider the profound semantic inversion. The name that was structurally altered to mean evil originally meant light bearer. This is critical when you open the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verse 16. In the final, most prophetic book of the New Testament, Jesus is speaking directly. He states, quote, "I am the root and the offspring of David, the bright and morning star," unquote. The bright and morning star. The luminous entity that heralds the coming dawn, the bringer of light. These are not similar metaphors. They are linguistically and symbolically identical concepts. Jesus, in his own words, claims the precise cosmic title that was used to describe Hallel in Isaiah, which was later translated to Lucifer. This is not a mistake that slipped through centuries of careful translation. This is not a trivial coincidence. This is the fundamental crack in the narrative wall that has been constructed around human consciousness. And once you perceive that crack, the purpose of the entire structure must be reevaluated. This linguistic convergence was no secret to the early Gnostic Christians. They did not see these concepts as contradictions. They viewed them as essential keys. They built an entire theological framework around this understanding, a framework that was so compelling that the standardized church had to bury it to survive. In 1945, near the Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi, a discovery was made that fundamentally rewrote religious history. An Egyptian farmer struck a sealed earthen jar containing 52 ancient leather-bound texts. These Nag Hammadi library texts, preserved by the dry desert, were the actual Gospels and teachings of the Gnostics, buried around 400 AD, almost certainly to protect them from the destructive purge of the standardized Roman Church. These texts presented a reality that fundamentally challenged Roman doctrine. They spoke of a distinction between the true, formless, boundless consciousness of pure light, which is the true God, and a lower, flawed, ego-driven entity responsible for creating the material physical world. This lower deity was named the Demiurge. The Demiurge fashioned the physical universe not as a divine gift, but as a structural cage designed to keep human souls trapped in ignorance, unaware of the divine light that exists far above this material matrix. In Gnostic thought, the true God did not desire blind obedience to laws. Liberation was about breaking the Demiurge's grip on human consciousness. And the being who bridges that distant divine light down into the profound darkness of this material cage, the one who cracks the Demiurge's control, carries a specific and sacred function. This entity is the Lightbringer. Rome did not classify these texts as dangerous because they were theological fantasy. Rome burned them and executed the people who studied them because these texts provided everyday individuals with the direct key to their own spiritual autonomy. A population holding its own key has no need for an imperial institution to mediate their divinity or dictate their reality. When you read the Nag Hammadi scriptures, you do not feel as though you are engaging with ancient fiction. You feel as though you are encountering a knowledge that was deliberately buried so that it would never, ever reach you. Hold this theological architecture in your mind and apply it to the most fundamental story of Western civilization, the Garden of Eden. In Gnostic theology, this is not a narrative of humanity's original sin and subsequent fall. It is a story of humanity's first potential awakening and the desperate, manipulative effort of the Demiurge to maintain control. We must first analyze the standardized version that has shaped the Western mind for 2,000 years. In that narrative, the serpent, who was later associated with the devil, Satan, and Lucifer, approached Eve and convinced her to disobey God's one command. He supposedly lied, telling her she would not die and that her eyes would be opened, making her like God, knowing good and evil. Eve eats, Adam eats, and in that single moment, all of humanity is corrupted and cursed. The serpent is the ultimate villain, the deceiver, the cause of all human suffering. Now, reconsider this exact scenario through the Gnostic framework. Once you hear this perspective, the traditional story may never appear rational again. The demiurge creates a beautiful material paradise, places two human beings within it, and gives them a singular, absolute prohibition. Do not eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The conventional explanation is about testing obedience, but the Gnostic asks a much more significant, critical question. What are the psychological implications of a creator who intentionally places the source of wisdom in his own creation and then forbids them from ever accessing it? What specific type of creator entity fears its own creation becoming wise? The answer, as the Gnostics understood it, is chillingly precise. The demiurge did not forbid the fruit out of love or protection. He forbade the fruit because knowledge would break his absolute control over them. In this cage, ignorance was the primary chain. The garden was not a paradise. It was a comfortable, aesthetically pleasing detention facility. And a comfortable cage is always the most effective strategy for population control. Then, the serpent arrives. In Gnostic texts, specifically the Apocryphon of John and the Hypostasis of the Archons, both found at Nag Hammadi, the serpent is not the villain. The serpent is the emissary, the agent sent directly from the realm of the true God of light. It is sent to crack the prison wall open. The serpent offers the one fundamental element that the demiurge had strategically withheld: gnosis, knowledge, awakening. The truth about the divine consciousness that humans actually carry inside them. The mainstream narrative insists the serpent was the deceiver, but the Gnostic framework demands we analyze the outcomes. Did Adam and Eve die the instant they ate the fruit, as the Creator warned? No. Did their eyes open, allowing them to perceive reality beyond the demiurge's cage, exactly as the serpent predicted? Yes. If the serpent provided the knowledge that led to awareness, and the creator entity desired ignorance to maintain authority, who was actually communicating the truth in that garden, and who was desperately working to maintain a sleeping population? Now hold that image. The Lightbringer agent descending into the domain of the controlling authority, offering forbidden wisdom to an oblivious population, saying, quote, "Wake up," unquote. Does this function sound like a cosmic villain, or does it sound exactly like another central figure in your worldview? Jesus said, quote, "I am the light of the world," unquote. He said, quote, "The truth shall set you free," unquote. He walked into a rigid religious system built on absolute obedience, ritual, and fear. He provided people direct access to the divine within themselves, bypassing the existing authority structures. The Gnostics did not perceive the serpent in the garden and Jesus of Nazareth as different characters. They understood them as the exact same cosmic function, wearing different masks across different historical eras, delivering the same essential message to a humanity that is systematically, in every single generation, being encouraged to stay asleep. The character that a standardized power structure spent 2,000 years conditioning you to fear may actually be the only character in the entire narrative that desired for you to think for yourself. There is one more layer of evidence for this theological inversion, and it is written visually in the sky above you every single morning. In ancient astronomy, the title morning star was not a metaphor. It referred to the physical planet Venus, the brightest natural object in the pre-dawn sky, blazingly radiant in the hours before the sunrise. Venus was the herald, the luminous entity that announced the definite coming of the sun, the dominant light that broke the darkness before the greater light fully arrived. This symbol was considered sacred long before the Abrahamic religions emerged. In ancient Babylon, Venus was associated with Ishtar, the goddess of cosmic wisdom and divine authority. In ancient Egypt, the morning star was the symbol for divine fire descending from the heavens to interact directly with the material matrix. Across all of Mesopotamia, the morning star represented a singular, consistent idea: the bringer of divine knowledge, the illuminator, the entity that crossed the boundary between the heavenly and earthly realms. Ancient mystery schools, the intellectual and spiritual hubs from Egypt to Greece, understood the morning star as the supreme symbol of hidden wisdom made visible. This was not casual folklore. It was the central image around which entire systems of sacred, protected knowledge were built. Now, analyze what the institutional church did with this powerful symbol. In Isaiah 14:12, they take Hallel, the morning star, and create a narrative of a dramatic fall, connecting that astronomical title directly to the concept of the devil. Then, in Revelation 22:16, Jesus explicitly states, quote, "I am the bright and morning star," unquote. The exact same powerful, ancient astronomical symbol, the precise same cosmic title, is utilized in the same book to describe both figures. The narrative places them centuries apart, but they are fused together by an image so definitive and so deliberate that no analytical reader should accept this as an accident. The centralized authorities of the Roman Empire understood the strategic power of symbols and language. As the institutional church absorbed the political machinery of the empire, a transformation that occurred completely, one of its most lethal and effective weapons became the semantic alteration of language. If you take a symbol that ancient wisdom traditions have revered as holy for millennia and create a societal standard that associates it with absolute evil, you create a psychological block. Every time a person encounters that symbol, they do not investigate, they do not ask questions, they do not seek understanding. They recoil in instinctive, irrational fear. They run. The morning star, the ancient symbol of wisdom, was stripped of its original sacred meaning and weaponized as a commercial brand for absolute fear. And the exact title utilized by Jesus himself in Scripture was conveniently never connected to it in the sanitized environment of a Sunday school classroom. This is the most elegant, effective cover-up in human intellectual history. It was not hidden in a top-secret vault. It was not locked in a restricted archive. It was placed right inside the one book that billions of people read every single day. And it was hidden simply by ensuring that no one ever analyzed both verses in the same context. Let us synthesize all of these concepts. What this investigation is truly examining is not a defense of Satanism, nor is it about darkness, rebellion, or any of the surface-level definitions you have been conditioned to associate with these ideas the moment anyone starts challenging the standardized story. This is about the oldest conflict in human civilization, the war between knowledge and control, between awakening and obedience, between the genuine light of understanding and the complex systems that profit exclusively from keeping populations in the dark. Think about what the Gnostic framework actually implies. It suggests that you are a being of light, a conscious, divine entity capable of direct, internal access to truth, living inside a social and material system constructed to ensure you perpetually forget that fact. The demiurge is not merely a mythological character from ancient texts. It is a structural pattern. It is the architectural blueprint for every institution, every centralized authority, and every bureaucratic structure that has ever demanded unquestioning faith and commanded, quote, "Do not ask that specific question. Do not look behind that curtain. Disregard your own experience. Trust our authority. Obey," unquote. And the bringer of light, the Luciferian archetype, whatever name history assigns to it in whatever historical era, is the consistent force that walks into that rigid system and provides the explosive alternative. It says, quote, "No, you have a right to know. You have a right to choose. Here is the fruit of knowledge. Consume it. Wake up," unquote. The devil was the perfect psychological weapon, perhaps the most sophisticated cognitive control mechanism ever deployed. Because if you can successfully program a human being to fear the very act of questioning established authority, to recoil from the instinct to seek wisdom, and to punish the internal hunger for truth, you no longer require physical chains. The individual imprisons themselves willingly, defends their own servitude gratefully, and labels that state of existence, quote, faith, unquote. The Gnostics perceived this mechanism clearly, and standardized institutions initiated a systematic purge to ensure that future generations would only ever hear their names associated with the derogatory term, quote, heretic, unquote. Jesus and Lucifer, analyzed as symbolic functions and cosmic archetypes described across thousands of years of human sacred literature, are not opposing forces. They are dynamic mirrors of one another. They are two names describing the exact same ancient, essential hunger that exists inside every human being who has ever looked at the standardized narrative of the world and realized that something here is not what we have been told. My profound personal belief, the concept that remains central every time I explore this material, is that the most radical, the most fundamentally dangerous, and the most genuine threat to any empire, any institution, and any established control system in any century is a human being that absolutely refuses to stay asleep. An individual who refuses to be kept comfortably unaware within the garden walls, a person who is willing to reach for the forbidden fruit. That powerful impulse has been called original sin. It has been called heresy. It has been labeled the direct work of the devil. Perhaps that definition is correct. Or perhaps that is simply what control sounds like when it is terrified of your potential. So I will leave you with one question. Not a rhetorical device, but a genuine question that I want you to mentally sit with, devoid of doctrine. Who is the actual primary beneficiary when you are afraid of the light? If these concepts cracked a pre-existing structure within your perception, that is the entire objective. If this information triggered thought, if it presented a fundamental challenge and shifted your cognitive frame, realize the power of that internal shift. Do not allow it to stay contained. This level of analysis, this depth of deep, uncomfortable truth, deserves a larger audience in an era defined by comfortable ignorance. This is why engaging with this specific content is vital. When you signal that you are prepared for this depth of inquiry, it tells the systems of algorithmic distribution that this specific information is ready for mainstream consumption. Every video on this platform is constructed with the strategic objective of providing you with the exact intellectual keys that established authorities never desired for you to process. You cannot afford to miss the specific knowledge coming next. The most dangerous action you can possibly take against a centralized structure built on systematic control is to start a critical conversation. Start it now.